Hello, everybody. Welcome to your tax lien webinar session number 1. I'm your host, Erin Bates. I'm going to be the one to educate you through this process. So we're going to dive into this here. I'm going to open up my computer screen and present a slideshow for you. So please make sure that you have a pen and paper available so you can follow along, as there's going to be a vast amount of information coming at you in a short period of time. So bear with me just one moment here. I'm going to unshare this and bring up my computer screen for you guys to see. So, okay, so let's dive in here and get started. Okay, all right, you guys, welcome again. So as I mentioned, today we're going to go over all of the tax lien basics. So everything that we're going to need to know kind of from start to finish, what we're going to be looking for. And we're heavily going to be focusing today on investing in the state of Florida and what all is entailed there, because that's where a company has got a vast lot of inventory and have for a very long period of time. So we're going to educate you on how the process there will work and also explore all the terminology, what we need to know. So everything's going to make a whole lot more sense for you guys moving forward. So again, my name is Erin Bates, and I am going to be the presenter of your webinar. So let's kind of continue on here and learn a little bit about tax lien investing. So you guys, we are an educational company that evolved into an exclusive source for the secondary market. As you know, there's going to be a difference between the primary market and us here in the secondary market. And I'll explain that more in greater detail here in just a moment. So we're looking to provide opportunities to invest in tax liens and also in tax deeds. And also we help investors avoid the competition with the primary market. Okay, so the company was formed in 2008 in order to provide tools and also resources to individual investors like yourself and myself. So with that said, you guys, I want to break down the differences here of a tax lien versus a tax deed. Okay, so as you can see there in the top, the blue with the tax lien, it is a first position lien. So a lien imposed by law upon a property to secure the payment of taxes, or tax lien are imposed for delinquent taxes owned on real or personal property. And of course, each county has varying rules and also regulations regarding what tax is due and also when it needs to be paid by. When we're going to be evaluating tax deeds, a tax deed's forced sale of a property for unpaid taxes. So if a property owner fails to pay taxes, the county forecloses and schedules a deed for the auction. Also, starting bids are often only the back taxes that are owed on the property, although the situation, of course, may vary from one county to another. So the deed is issued to the highest bidder at the auction. Okay, so one is a first position lien where a tax deed is purchasing the property basically outright. Okay, so what we're going to do here is dive into some of the terminology. As I mentioned, we need to get sort of a bare bone basics and also a baseline of what this verbiage means. So then that way it's all going to make a whole lot more sense moving forward here. So when we're speaking of redemption, there's going to be 3 different words that you're going to hear all the time that sound very similar. However, they are very different. One of them is your redemption period. The other will be the redemptive amount, and lastly, redemption. So when we're discussing redemption period, basically that's the time period when only the property owner can pay off their delinquent taxes. During this time, the lien holders cannot foreclose. So in the state of Florida, the redemption period, it's 2 years. So basically it's a 2-year grace period that protects the property owner from anybody being able to file a foreclosure on their home. Okay, when we're speaking of the redemptive amount, that's the amount that is needed to redeem tax defaulted property in full. This includes the interest that is accrued from the face value of the tax lien. And you guys, the difference of the face lien, or face value, pardon me, that is the initial value of the tax lien, whereas what you're purchasing the lien for will be the redemptive amount, and that's the face amount plus the interest that is accrued to date on that particular certificate. Okay, now when we speak of redemption, that's when a tax lien is paid off by the property owner or another lien holder. So at this time, this is when you're going to get your investment and also any interest that is accrued paid back to you. So of course, that's what we're looking for, is to receive redemption. So of course, you can receive a redemption by either accruing interest, or you could be redeemed by acquiring the actual deed to the property. Okay, so a little to elaborate further here on the primary versus the secondary market. So the primary market can carry out you'd have to basically carry out all of your own due diligence, okay? So that means that you're doing all of the research on each and every lien that you're going to be looking at through the primary market. Also, you would have to attend the auction in person and also online. So some counties have online auctions. In the state of Florida, they will all have online auctions as well as attending those auctions physically. But the biggest aspect I feel that you're bidding against there with the primary market is trying to bid against the institutional or also the individual investors. Those are the type of investors that come in with super, super deep pockets, right? Your major hedge fund investors, your institutional investors, or even those large real estate investors. So when they're coming in with tens of millions of dollars at a time, they're not much fun to try to outbid as individual investors. Okay, but also remember, if you're investing within the primary market, you're going to have to work through the county tax office to transfer the certificates into your name, and also to file what are called tax deed applications, or TDAs. Okay, and so I'll elaborate on what that means further, but that's all the administration work that you'll be expected to do there on your end, whereas here in the secondary market, we're going to provide assistance for that. Okay, but lastly, if you do purchase within the primary market, you're going to have to wait out what is called that redemptive period. Okay, so you can buy a certificate, but there's nothing that you can do with that certificate until it has gone past that 2-year redemptive period. Okay, so time is money. We don't want to have to sit around and wait. But if you guys do choose to branch off down the road and invest within the primary market, by all means, we would be able to provide you with their hotline number, but you will be on your own from that point forward. Okay, so for those of you that know exactly which state, you know which property, you could stick a pin in a map, the primary market is where you're going to try to invest. Okay, whereas here, us here in the secondary market, all of our liens, you guys, they're already seasoned. Okay, so what that means basically is that 2-year redemption period, it's already surpassed. Okay, so once we purchase the liens and then we get them transferred over into your name or into your business name, that typically will take about 4 to 6 weeks to complete. But once that's been completed, now we'll be able to file the foreclosure on the property. And when we do so, we're going to be able to trigger a guaranteed 18% annual interest on your all amount that's invested, but we'll also have the hopes of acquiring the property. Okay, so as I mentioned, time is money. We don't want to just have to sit around and wait and hold the lien until we're able to activate it. Okay, now also there won't be any bidding against any other investors because we own all the certificates here as a company. So what we're doing in essence is we're just simply turning around and selling the certificates to you on an individual basis. Okay, and that's where either your portfolio manager will come into play or your coach, depending on whichever package it is that you get yourselves into. But they're going to be able to provide a portfolio for you and then go through and do the due diligence with you guys. So that's all going to depend on what it is that you're getting yourselves into in your initial stages of which package that you're looking at. Now, also the reserved inventory, that is our greater lot of inventory that has greater margins of value, that if you did acquire the properties, that you'll be able to unload them very, very quickly as they're very attractive liens. Okay, but if you do invest into the reserve inventory, you will have the full support of a client success advocate. They're the ones that are going to get your bidder numbers for you. They will also be the ones to transfer those certificates over into your names for you. They will be the ones to file those tax deed applications and provide the assistance there, but also assist you with helping you get redeemed on the back end by facilitating through the counties on your behalf. Okay, so here in the secondary market, please make sure that you expect our assistance from very start to very finish. All right, let's take a look here at the differences between the face amounts and also those redemptive amounts. The face amount, as I mentioned, that is the initial value of the outstanding tax bill. Okay, so it's the tax amount issued on a lien. So for example, if the county assessed your property and they said that your taxes were $800, that would be the face amount. Okay, but every certificate that we have here will already have an established interest rate that will be attached to it, and that will be coming from the primary market. So whatever interest rate is attached to that certificate, that's the interest that will simply start to accrue on the face value of the certificate only. Okay, whereas the redemptive amount, that's the face amount plus any interest that is accrued to date on that certificate. So again, if you purchased a certificate that had a face value of 800 at 6%, basically to be purchasing it, you'd be looking at about a $900 redemptive value. Okay, now the face amount of the certificate, that will never ever change. That will always remain the same. Whereas the redemptive values for the certificates, those will increase each and every month on the first of the month because the interest is accruing on the face value. Okay, so you guys, when we're speaking of roll-up or delinquent taxes, the roll-up is the full total amount of taxes that are owed on that property. Okay, and so when you purchase a lien, the objective isn't just to stay idle on that lien and accrue the interest on the face amount. Objectively, what you'll always want to do is to buy out the remainder of the back taxes. When you do so, you're going to purchase the full roll-up amount by filing a tax deed application, and you're going to buy out all the certificates that are above yours and also the ones that are beneath yours. Okay, so right there it shows you if you own the 2016 certificate for that $800, when you go to file the tax deed application, you're going to have to buy out the 15 certificate holder, the 14, also the 13, the 17, the 18, and also the 19. Okay, so the grand total of the all-in amount of the investment would be $5,575. Okay, so please remember that that's what we're going to consider as working capital, because the beginning stages of your investment will be the inexpensive part. It's going to be 4 to 6 weeks later, once we get that lien transferred into your name, this is where we're going to want to buy out the remainder of those back taxes. Okay, so that's what we're going to call your roll-up or your subsequent delinquent taxes. Now, a little further here on the tax deed application, because when you file a TDA, that is the very first start of the foreclosure process in the state of Florida. Okay, it's all done electronically nowadays. So the moment you file the tax deed application, that's the moment you're going to buy out the remainder of those taxes. And the moment that you submit the payment, that will trigger the 18% annual interest on your total amount that is invested. Okay, so that's the given second. When you trigger the tax deed application, it does not matter any longer what your face value of the certificate was, nor does it matter whatever interest rate that it came in at, because you're triggering it back to a guaranteed 18% annual interest on your full amount that is invested. And now you're going to expedite the whole process because you've now actively pushed the property into foreclosure. So once you've done so, this is now where the county will notify the property owner and also the other lien holders with a certified letter that somebody has now pushed the property into foreclosure. Okay, so how you're going to be able to kind of determine a little bit easier whether or not you will acquire the property or if you'll expect to be redeemed is based off of what is called the horizon lien to value. We're going to be referring to this as the HLTV. Okay, so basically how we're going to go about figuring this ratio is the amount of taxes owed on a property compared to the assessed value. Okay, so your full total roll-up amount or your full total amount of taxes that are owed on the property divided by the assessed value, that's what's going to give us what's called an HLTV ratio. Okay, now when we understand this HLTV, it's going to help us make a decision on which direction that you're going to want to take your investment, because rule of thumb of what we're looking for that ratio to be is 90% or lower. Okay, if it comes in at 90% or lower, then that would mean that it's a safe investment and very little due diligence would be involved. Okay, because 90% or lower would mean that it's going to be unlikely that you're going to acquire the property and most likely get redeemed. Even if you did acquire the property and you simply turned around and sold it for just the assessed value, that would mean that you'd make a 10% margin of profit. Okay, but the lower that this HLTV starts to show, say it comes in at 60 or 40 or 30%, the lower that that HLTV ratio shows, the lower chance you have of acquiring the property. It would mean that there's very little taxes that are owed on the property compared to the value of the property. So when we force the issue of foreclosure, you would expect that the property owner would most likely pay up. However, if they do not, it will still go to the tax deed auction, and that will be where the minimum bid starts. And so that too will quickly get outbid. Okay, so if you do see an HLTV ratio that is up over 90% or even up over 100%, that can be also very common. You don't want to just discredit that lien, you guys, but if you do see that the lien amount exceeds the assessed value, that's where you're going to want to dive in and make sure to do further due diligence on the market value. Because if it's up over that 90 or up over 100%, that means that you have a much higher chance of acquiring the property. Okay, so you just want to make sure that it's not an upside down investment of any sort. Now, once we go through this, we only have 4 different methods of being redeemed, or 4 methods of redemption. Okay, and there's only 2 different ways that we can invest, and that's whether we stay as idle investors when we first purchase the liens, or if we choose to go active on the investment by filing the tax deed applications. So ultimately, of course, you want to be able to file on as many tax deed applications as you can at one given time, but perhaps it's just not feasible to file on all of them at the same time. So you could go after one of them at a time if you choose to. Okay, but if you sat there as an idle investor, what you're waiting for to be redeemed is for either just the property owner to pay off some taxes. If they pay off your certificate, that is how you would get redeemed on the face value of the certificate. Okay, however, you don't know when a property owner is going to pay off some taxes. It could take months, but the reality of that is that could potentially take years. Okay, the second thing that you're waiting to have happen as an idle investor is for another idle investor to file the tax deed application before you do. Okay, because if they do that before you do, they're the ones that are going to buy out all the redemptive values, which means your certificate will get paid out on the face value in the meantime. Okay, so only one idle investor can go active per property. It's whoever it is that does it first. That's who's going to maximize the rate of return and actively go after the property, where every other investor will get paid out idly on the face amount. Okay, now how any portfolio manager or coach would advise you to invest is the third line down. They'll want for you to file the tax deed application, because when you do so and you buy out the remainder of those taxes, of course, you've now forced the foreclosure. You've triggered the maximum 18% annual interest on your all amount invested, but you've also expedited the process, because usually from start to finish, you should be looking about an average of a 6-month period of time. Okay, because when you file a tax deed application, one of 2 things will happen. If the property owner pays off, that's how you would get redeemed that way. However, if the property owner does not pay off, this is where the property will automatically get scheduled to go to what's called the tax deed auction. Okay, now when they start the minimum bid on that auction, it's going to be everything that you put into the investment plus the 18% annual interest that you were guaranteed. Okay, so all it will take is one bidder to outbid you. If they outbid you, you're going to get paid out on your you're going to get paid out with that 18% annual interest, and they're actively going on to outbid for the property. And of course, whoever has the highest bid, they will then move forward with the deed for that property. Okay, so a little bit further here to elaborate on the idle versus active. As you can see just by these pictures, an idle investor, it's a little bit more relaxed, right? But as an idle investor, you guys remember, whatever that interest is that came in from the primary market, that will be the interest that starts to accrue on the face value of the certificate only. Okay, on average, you're looking about a 10 to 12% average return. But again, that could be as high as 18%. It may have got bid down as low as 0.25%, or anywhere in there in between in 0.25% increments. Okay, but because there's not a set redemption period here, because you don't know when another idle investor is going to go active, and you also don't know when a property owner is just going to pay some taxes, this is where you really want to make sure that you keep your eye on your expiration date, because the expiration date of a certificate in the state of Florida has the shelf life of 7 years. Okay, if you were to allow for your certificate to expire, that's going to be how you would lose the redemptive value that you purchased it for. Okay, now it's very common to have an idle and an active portfolio running at the same time, because as I mentioned, you don't need to file on everything at the same time. You just need to make sure that you file on it before the lien itself expires. Okay, so say that you've gone through your redemption, or now you've received a redemption. This is now where you could utilize that to file a tax deed application on your next idle lien that will be sitting in your portfolio. And of course, the moment you go active, that's the moment that you file a tax deed application. That's going to trigger the 18% annual interest on your full amount that is invested, and actively you're going after the property. So as I mentioned, you're going to expedite the process from start to finish. On average, you're looking about 6 months. Okay, now I want to address where that fluctuating interest rate that I spoke of came from. Okay, because when you first buy your lien, as I mentioned, there's already going to have an interest rate that's going to be attached to it. where does that interest rate come from, and who gets awarded those certificates initially right out of the gate when they're first issued. Okay, so remember, in order for a certificate to come to fruition, a property owner basically has to go delinquent on their back taxes for 1 year. And that's where the county will then issue a certificate on it. Okay, but who gets those certificates initially, and where does that interest rate come from? That's what we're addressing here. Okay, so you guys, when those investors in the primary market come in, they're coming in with tens and tens of millions of dollars at a time. They have no interest on foreclosing on any properties or acquiring any properties. What they're looking to do is they want to park their tens of millions of dollars for that 2-year redemptive period where nobody can do anything with those certificates but the property owner. Okay, but what they're going to do is they're going to park their money at a secured interest rate. So where does the interest rate come into play? Okay, now keep in mind that those investors, because they're not looking to acquire any of those properties, what they're going to do here is they're going to have a bid down method on the actual interest rate. Okay, so they can't bid down the amount of the lien. The lien is the amount of the lien. So instead, Florida is going to attach an 18% annual interest, and they're going to have a bidding war in 0.25% increments. Okay, so 18%, 17.75, 17.5, you get the drift. That can be bid down lower than 1%, all the way down to 0.25% in fact. Okay, so you're asking yourself, well, why would those investors bid it down to 0.25%? That's not a lot of interest, which is correct. Okay, but the reason why those primary investors will do that is if they bid it anything lower than 5% and the property owner pays off during that 2-year redemptive period, they are guaranteed a minimum of 5%. Okay, but how this simply impacts us as the investor is when we purchase the certificates, whatever that interest rate is, even if it's sitting at 0.25%, that 0.25% is what's going to start to accrue on the face value of the certificate only. Okay, so if we see that, that's going to incentivize us to file the tax deed application on that particular lien so we can boost it back to a guaranteed 18% annual interest on your full amount that is invested. Okay, so ultimately that's only going to impact as an idle investor. So when we're looking at interest rate and also property acquisition, okay, this is where we're going to have our expectations, because if you're looking to simply accrue interest, obviously you can calculate the interest you will be earning on the face amount or the total roll-up amount. Okay, or if you're looking for acquisition, obviously you can acquire the property. Also, you have the options to flip it, rent it, or even potentially just turn around and sell it. That, as you as an individual investor, is going to completely depend on what you're looking to do with that particular property. Okay, so lastly here, you guys, please, in order for all of us to be successful, we need for you to succeed. And of course, by being able to provide seasoned liens from our inventory and helping you accomplish your goals, of course, we can keep the ball rolling by reinvesting. What you're going to notice is this is very, very much a recycle, repeat over and over and over. Ultimately, you're going to most likely accrue the interest, but over time, you will end up acquiring properties. Okay, and that's where we simply don't hold the crystal ball of which property that you're going to acquire. Okay, so you guys, I just wanted to make sure here before I leave you, I wanted to say thank you very much for joining us for our basics here today. I hope to see you back for our webinar session number 2. So again, we'll be having a lot more information coming at you then. Thanks very much. We'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.